2nd. This is our weekly development check-in. And before we move on to the agenda, I would like to go around and have everybody introduce yourself, what's your name, where you're from, and if there's anything that's not on the agenda you'd like to talk about in 30 seconds or less, you can feel free to do that. Nate, let's start with you.
Hello, I'm Nate Lampton. I'm in Oakland, California, and today we're just going to be going over the latest bug fixes and changes in core. So, ta-da.
That's in the agenda. Non-agenda. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Greece, usually in Australia though. And just as usual, joining so that I can see where I can help and where we're going.
Great. Tim, introduce yourself.
I am Tim. After a lengthy absence, I'm back, easing back into things. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota today. So, and nothing particular on my agenda. Just life is calming down, so I wanted to check in and ease back into the backdrop flow.
Great. Luke, I don't know if you're available to introduce yourself. We'll give you a minute.
Hi, I'm Luke, and I'm in an awkward situation for talking. So we got lucky just now, but I will largely be quiet.
Okay. Luke is calling from his car in California somewhere. I'm Jen Lampton. I'm in Oakland, California, and I'm very excited to see Tim again. All right, new in the land of contributed projects. We have had so many new projects since last week. So I think last week we didn't have any new projects, which I thought was strange. I know why now. We had them all this week. We have a new release for views, field, view, feeds, tamper, editable fields, conditional fields, and web form calculator, which are modules. And we have, I don't know how to pronounce this, Shasa2, which is a new theme. That's the one Olaf, I think, was working on. So yeah, a lot of great stuff happening in the last week.
Nice.
Let's see. Let's turn it over to Nate to talk about Backdrop Core.
Okay. So of our items that we have pulled out, we resolved a couple of them in the past or before the last meeting. So the list of items that we call out for the next bug fix release are kind of shrinking. So 1.16.3 is the next bug fix release. And of the issues that we have pulled out here, there's really only two bugs that we're giving particular attention right now. One of them is a regression that came up in 1.16, and that is issue 4407. And that is an issue where the list of text formats doesn't show up in the right order when you're looking at the administrative page listing the text formats. And when you if you rearrange the filters and then rearrange the formats and then save, it saves the formats correctly, but it doesn't show them in the right order. It shows them alphabetical. There hasn't been any attention on this issue. We don't even have a pull request for it yet since the release of 1.16. So I think that's an issue that it's probably not terribly difficult to fix. It's just that we haven't gotten any eyeballs on it. So 4407 could use a developer's hand. Next up is restore views pager by date. That's issue 2766. Indigo Zala has been working on correcting this pager or restoring this functionality, and it looks like the pull request works correctly. It's just that we need some additional testing because there was a contrib integration. They're trying to get calendar module working correctly with the core version of date. And so this makes it so that those two things work together. And we need some testing to make sure that this fix in core fixes the contrib module. So we need to test both of those things in tandem. It also needs some automated tests before that gets merged in. But the pull request is there and it's currently marked needs review. We haven't brought it up recently, so I wanted to mention the views cross-ports issue 3685. With so many other bug fixes coming in all over the place, and some of the current issues that have pull requests are like subsets of the views cross-port issues that we've been encountering as a community, like certain issues within views that are more prevalent, but most of those prevalent issues are solved by the cross-ports if we would have just done the cross-ports previously. And so it would be great to get some attention on the cross-ports again and start, back where we left off and continue cross-porting from the older versions of views up into the newer versions of views, because these separate issues, while nice that we solve them, that we can solve them separately, like if we just would have done the cross-ports, we wouldn't have run into them in the first place. Okay, let's see. Next up, Jeff Serendipity has been asking about getting automated code syntax checking or automatic linting in issue 3213. And as usual, I came in and sort of derailed things by making a completely off-the-wall suggestion that, first of all, GitHub Actions is now accessible to us, and it wasn't when this issue was first raised. And I do still think that GitHub Actions is a convenient tool that is accessible to us that we can now start running. Pretty much all of our continuous integration work, if we wanted to, could be run against GitHub Actions instead of using any third-party provider. And I think that linting would be a really great place to start utilizing that functionality. So while GitHub Actions is, I think, going to be a valuable tool for us in the future, 3213, I recently suggested that we use GitHub's new linting tool that is like a universal linter. And they did add PHP support in the past week, which is cool. So now GitHub's built-in automatic official action for linting code can check PHP. However, what it actually does is really pretty limited. It can only check for like blatant syntax errors, like missing semicolons, things like that, to make sure that your PHP code is all acceptable and valid. And I think what we really want is something that's more comprehensive, that does, checks for spaces instead of tabs, spaces between curly brackets, those sorts of things. That we want consistent code formatting, which is a much more complicated problem than just checking for syntax errors.
Syntax errors we would catch anyway with our testing, right? Because everything would explode. Yeah. But it doesn't add anything.
Yeah, not particularly valuable for us, I don't think. So that means that we're probably back to, again, like writing our own implementation that runs our own linter with PHP CS, most likely. So I guess the good news is that the work that, Jen, you put in previously to get something like that working hasn't been wasted.
I was kind of hoping it would be easier to use a GitHub action, but
yeah. You mean the official linter that they were creating? Yeah. I had hopes for it too, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, maybe it will in the future, but I mean, they just released the quote super linter like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they just added PHP support 6 days ago. So it's possible, that it might get more powerful over time.
PHP CS open source.
I can't imagine it's not.
It is, I think there's a repo.
It's GPL3.
Okay.
All right, so that's all we've got to pull out for the 116.3 milestone. There's also like 60 some issues in the milestone itself. I've been working through all of the RTBC queue, which is currently empty, and then I started working through the Works for Me queue, which also had a lot of really great stuff in it. So I've been working to try to keep those things clean, and yeah, it's a good time. If you're working on something that needs review and needs final approval, the slate is pretty light right now to get things through. Okay, let's move on to 117. 117 is the next it's the next minor release that will come out September 15th with feature freeze on September 1st. And we don't have a whole lot of things on the docket for 117. Jen's the only advocate for an individual issue at the moment, which is using the administration theme for the login pages, issue 4410. Do you have any updates on that, Jen?
Yeah, it looks like we've gotten some great testing. So thank you, Gregory and Olaf. And both recommended adding a cache clear after we change that setting, because if you just change the setting and then visit the user form, nothing's changed until you clear all the caches. So I thought that would be reasonable. I don't know if there's a way to clear caches only for those pages, or if I need to clear all the caches.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Is there a downside to doing a complete cache clear with that change?
Well, I mean,
Other
it's
than-
probably, yeah, your caches are gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's
But-
not, do we
but-
have rules around when we should and shouldn't be clearing caches?
I think that there's a lot of things, like especially around appearance, like when you change it. I mean, when you change a theme, when you enable a module, those things clear all caches. I'm not sure about things like if you change the setting for like use administration theme for node edit pages or for content edit pages, if that does a full cache clear. But I think that any save to that form,
that affects authenticated users, so it wouldn't matter anyway.
yeah.
So this
But
doesn't.
I think what I was getting at is I think that any change to the appearance form, wouldn't that already clear all caches? Like changing the administration theme doesn't clear all caches, for example.
Well,
I
it
think
might.
it does.
This change doesn't.
Well, anyway, I would say my initial thought is that I doubt that that would be unacceptable to clear all caches.
Good. That's my plan.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
causing a bit of a weird issue where switching between tabs would show the still, like even after cache clear, at least on during my testing, it would still bring up the old thing. But then if you'd refresh one time, it would go away. Anyways, I haven't seen that behavior, but yeah, I only saw it in the sandbox.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that a browser cache will cause a little issue there because the anonymous pages out of the box are set to like a 5-minute cache lifetime or something like that. So the browser will cache the login page if you go back and visit it.
The good news is that whoever changes that, it will probably be a one-time change, so it will happen once, and then the site will be using that. So
Right.
yeah, it might be a bit awkward. Yeah.
It's also more likely to happen early on in the lifetime of a site. That's the sort of change that you would set up while you were initially building out the site, and pretty unlikely to change, on a production website that's seeing millions of page views or something like that. All right, so that's it. That's the only item that we've got pulled out for 117.
Sorry, I forgot to mention. Sorry, Jen, this seemed a bit awkward to me, and maybe I mentioned it in the comments. The breadcamp, like on that page, the login page on wide screens, it seems completely disconnected. Like it's at the top left and a great distance from the whole thing. So maybe, I don't know, want to put a container around it and then.
Is part of our grid system. I think it's already in a container, but the container on wide screens is wide. So that's why it does that. I was hesitant to do a specific override for this page where we move the breadcrumb, because if you go from this page to another page, like having the breadcrumb jump around might be really weird. But I don't know. So
I think I have a screenshot there. Maybe we invite people for more input with regards to that.
more feedback, and maybe add it with design, see if we can get some designer feedback on what they think we should do there. But yeah.
It's not only the aesthetics, is the mouse needs to travel a great distance to, yeah.
That's also the kind of thing I think we could introduce later if we wanted to get the setting in first and then fix the style of
Yeah, we could do a follow-up for that. Yeah, sure.
depending on what's ready.
So outside of the advocated for issues for 117, we also have the initiatives that are long-term projects. We've got 2 active initiatives right now. Telemetry conceptually will track usage information about what settings people have on their backdrop sites and what modules they have installed, and report that back to backdropcms.org for us to make decisions based on product usage. And Serendipity is the advocate for the telemetry initiative, but he is supposed to hear no update on telemetry for this week. Luke is the initiative owner for the other one. Theme development should be unnecessary to use Backdrop CMS. Luke, do you have any updates on that initiative?
We're pretty light on updates this week for various reasons, but we're gearing up. I actually set up a demo site earlier today, so you know it hasn't had time to propagate, but I guess actually was it before the meeting that we were talking about setting up a separate initiative meeting for it. So I'll be I guess I can kind of officially go forward with that to say that I'm inclined to take the suggestions to set up a weekly meeting for the initiative at a different time than the mid-Thursday afternoon to sort of test the social appropriateness of that. And I'll cut my update short with that, okay?
Sounds good. All right, that's it for the product update. We've got a couple of things in the general discussion category. Jen, would you lead us through these items?
Sure. So the first one is BW Panda posted, I think it was BW Panda, posted a link into Zulip asking if anyone wanted to create or take the open source software questionnaire that the Linux Foundation had put out. And so it says it would take 15 minutes. It actually took me half an hour. So be prepared if you're going to take it. But one of the questions was, like, has your open source software product applied for and received this badge? And this badge is one that the Linux Foundation puts out called the Core Infrastructure Initiative Badge, which basically says that your open source project follows security best practices. And I thought, oh, I didn't even know that existed. I'll go see if I can apply for it. And so I started walking through the application process today. And most of the stuff we're already doing. And so you put in like the URL for your project in the GitHub account, and it'll do some automatic checks. But then there's a lot of questions about like process that it can't see visually from like how you handle your security issues, because all of that stuff is private. And then there's some questions, some technical questions about code, which I didn't entirely know the answer to. Some of them I didn't really understand what they were asking, and I think it might apply only to compiled languages, which is why I wasn't sure how that fit in with our project. And then some of them were just questions I didn't know the answers to. So I've put that list of questions at the bottom of the agenda. We don't need to go over them during the recording, but I thought it might be interesting for people to know that I'm trying to get this badge for Backdrop, which I think will be pretty cool if we can get it. So that's that.
Yeah, I tried to take the survey as well, and I was stuck to pretty much the same questions. Like I wasn't sure about the cryptography being used for pull requests, things like that. So yeah, would be helpful.
And there's a bunch of stuff like it's recommending automatic checks that I thought there are tools we could integrate with our test suite that might work. Like we're talking about adding PHP-CS linting. We might also want to add some of these automatic security check tools. And some of them I don't know, again, if they'll apply to PHP or not, but it's recommending like static code analysis tool versus dynamic code analysis tool. I don't know. we'll see what's available for PHP, but they did look like interesting recommendations, and I found going through the questionnaire really educational. I was like, what's that? And I researched it. So good stuff.
Yeah, it was some things like, are people allowed to file anonymous pull requests or similar like that? Like, do you know the faces of the people? Have you met the people that are committing code? Which were interesting questions to ask.
Yeah.
Or if they have specific names, I think, because we go by our GitHub handles, some of us.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
thought it was also interesting, like, do you require anyone who maintains a project to use two-factor authentication? I thought was really interesting because we recently added that to the requirements to be a member of the Contrib group. But Drupal.org does not yet require that. And so I went and checked, and sure enough, it's an option, but it's optional. It's not. And I was like, that's interesting. I hadn't considered that as being a potential attack vector, is that somebody could get access to a project and create a new release, and then before you know it, people are using something with an exploit. So yeah, there's just really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then the other item here is that I applied to be a project there's an event called it's called the Grace Hopper Conference. This year it's virtual, and they have an event as part of that conference, which is Open Source Day. So this conference is one that particularly is focused on women in computing. And their Open Source Day is essentially a sprint where they try and take a whole bunch of brand new contributors and get them to work on open source projects. And so I thought that sounded really exciting. And I was like, oh, we should totally have Backdrop in there. I'm happy to lead that. And we got accepted, which is great. They took a look at all of the open source software projects that were recommended, and they picked, I think, the ones that were the most mature and active, so that they could make sure that if people did get really involved, they would be able to have, ongoing work in that community, which I thought was really great. But they want to have two mentors, as we would call them, or they call them project representatives, who are around to help new contributors learn how the process of like getting installed, filing pull requests, the review and the issue queue, all of that stuff. And so it wouldn't necessarily need to be people who are helping with code so much as helping with process. Although if we are able to do code reviews, that's also helpful. Code reviews could be like, oh, we use a different indentation standard. Like, it doesn't have to be super in-depth, but just so that they can go through the process of getting that feedback, that would be really great. So I've signed up to be one of them, but I wanted to sort of put out there in the weekly meeting that we do need another representative. This particular conference is Tuesday, September 29th. So it's in the middle of a week. So that might be tricky for people because you'd have to probably take time off work to do it. But if anyone wants to help be a advocate for new women open source software contributors, woohoo! We need another set of hands.
The focus of this event is to get women involved, but it doesn't mean that the mentors are going to have to be women, right?
No, they said it would be nice.
Okay.
Like, it'd be nice if you had examples of women, but it is not a requirement. It's just, yeah.
Okay. If no one else puts their hand up, I'll probably do it. I'll take the day off.
Okay.
What date was that?
It's Tuesday, September 29th.
I could be available too, but we'll see. Probably other people that might be better. So let's see what happens.
Okay. So that's it for my general items.
Okay. Yeah, we can go over these super nerdy and highly technical questions, of which I'm afraid that I also won't have the answer to some of them after turning off the broadcast. So I think, do you guys have anything else you guys would like to mention? All right. Okay, well, we'll say thank you guys all for joining the meeting, and thanks everybody out there for watching and listening to these weekly check-ins. And we'll catch you guys all on the issue queue and see you guys next week. So bye.